So buy the book, you know what brings.
Thank you. Joseph Gagnon. And there's some interesting disturbed by what you say and what you have written in the book, with the following confusion, you give me confusion that they did not touch and bomb the house because they all worked for them. Most of us, many of others, both active in politics, no longer active in politics, did go through the task. Does it mean, or does it mean we all work for them unbeknown to each other?
I have no answer to your question. We do not know who worked for the other side, apart from those who went to make declarations at the TRC. We know that the TRC process was very difficult for a lot of people, including those who I talk about in the book, not because they don't like the concept of the TRC. It was too emotional for them. Some couldn't bear the idea of going to the TRC and talking about what happened to them. In particular, those people who feel that they were victims. Now, those people who worked for the other side, if they didn't go to the TRC, it basically means there's a lot potentially they're hiding. However, what this book tries not to do is to try and understand who those people are. And this is why in my interview with this partner to Eugene de Kock, the interview ended at the point where he made that statement. It remains a question that's yet to be answered. It would be extremely shocking if I would have identified one of my family members as having worked for the other side, and I was not ready to discard that. I am not saying they would have been part of it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Oh, sorry. No, my son, I just want to ask two questions. One question, why the movie? Why not the movie? Because many people are lazy, particularly the young. And then the second question that I would like to ask is, why did you decide to do it as yourself and not involve the political parties that you talk about? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Which I think is the easier one. I didn't involve the political parties because this was not a book in politics. This was not a book in military strategy. This was not a book to be owned by any institution. It is a book that tells the human side of the struggle. Therefore, I didn't need any license from an institution to write the book. If I had followed your route, I would have had to get approval from the PAC, from the ANC, I don't know who else. And it would have taken me 40 years to write this book. The first question, why a book? Why not a movie? I've been asked a slightly more difficult question than that. The question was, why number 43? There were so many houses in Swaziland that were doing exactly the same thing you're writing about. And I also acknowledge it in the book. There were many houses. two of which I can mention here. There was a house called the White House. And there was another house called Come Again. Very prominent houses. I talk about a lot of other houses as well. But these are very important for the purpose of today. Come Again is a house that housed the current president of South Africa, together with the current deputy president of the ANC. And why it ended up being called Come Again, each time you visited these two gentlemen, when they saw you out, they would always say, come again. And it became called Come Again. The White House is a house that housed John Nkadimeng, one of the founder members of the most successful labor unions in the country. He arrived in 1976 in Swaziland, first stayed at Come Again for a short period of time, and quickly realized that Come Again is actually not strategically positioned for what he wants to do. He decided to set himself up 2 blocks away from number 43, identifying the central nature of number 43 to the movement in Swaziland. At that point, the current president and the deputy president of the ANC were forced to leave Swaziland. Unfortunately, they left with 1 or 2 of my siblings. And that meant John Nkadimeng had to run the organization from Swaziland. And people around him were arguing that he's concentrating power and information around himself and the house. Thus, it was called the White House. Why not a movie? I may report now that I hadn't thought that this book was going to attract so much attention. I thought it was going to be a manuscript, which is going to be sitting in Magogo's wardrobe, which is a very effective filing cabinet. But after the book has been out there, I've had an approach to convert it into a movie. If you pray hard, it will probably turn out into a movie.
Thanks very much. Sebentile Gian is my name. Before I even read this book, I think, as you said, it's clear that it's not a novel. It's something that you need to read and reflect on. But I have one question. I'm very curious. I probably am asking this question on behalf of my family. Those that know me know exactly where I come from. And there have been many stories about ill treatment of cadres that passed through our country. But I want to know, as an individual, do you know for a fact, or have you heard, did you hear whilst you were there, perhaps maybe even your parents, did you get any support from the late King Sobhuza II? Or was it perhaps a case of he was fully behind you 100%, but those that were under him were divided? That's my question. Thank you.
That's a complex question. We're yet to deal with these things on Saturday when the book is launched in Swaziland. I can indicate now that at least the current king has embraced this project. I will not answer you directly to that question. I will tell a story which I think is going to illustrate what Sobhuza would do. There's no doubt that frontline states and other smaller states surrounding South Africa went through difficult times. They had to play a very delicate balance, running their economies in a sustainable way, and on the other hand, supporting and making sure that the movement and the liberation process continues. One fine morning, 4 comrades leave number 43 Trelawney Park in a Ford Cortina gear, which was described in the newspapers of Swaziland, for an operation in South Africa. This was around 11 o'clock in the morning. The reconnaissance was done. Everybody was convinced that the coast is clear. 25 kilometers on their road, there's suddenly a massive roadblock of police and soldiers. And these guys, determined in what they want to do, they thought to themselves, we are not going to get ourselves arrested. They turned around. And this happens Elobamba, those of us who know Swaziland, next to the fire station. They turned around, drove into the king's residence, and parked, got out of the car, walked into the kraal. This was 1980. It so happened that the king was in the vicinity. He asked a question, what is that commotion about? And they said, there are terrorists out there, heavy laden with arms. And the king's response was, okay, do you know where they come from? Do you know where they're going to? They said, no, we don't. And he said, leave them alone. Let them go where they're going to. They drove out of the place back to number 43 Trelawney Park to tell that tale. 2 weeks later, when the king had an opportunity to address the public, or address the nation as it's termed, he made an interesting statement. I'll say it in Siswati, it rhymes better. Maswati. Umuntu umakafika kaka atocela indzawo yekulala, acele emanti. Mnike indzawo yekulala, umnike emanti. Ungabese umakalele ufuna ukuthi ukunani emgodlweni wakhe. Uma uvula la emgodlweni uthola kunetinhloko tebantu utawuthini? Miyekele lo muntu uma kavuka ahambe ayela yakhona. Awumathi ukuthi ubuya, awumathi ukuthi uya. He was talking about that instance. For the 4th, 2nd, 3rd, and 1st English speakers, I will translate. If somebody visits you and asks for a place to sleep and asks for water, give him a place to sleep, give him water. Don't turn around when he goes to bed and when he falls asleep and try and see what is in his bag. What are you going to do if you find heads of human beings in there? You are an accomplice. You don't know this person, you don't know where he comes from, you don't know where he's going to. Give him what he wants. When he wakes up the following morning, bid him farewell. That is the only answer I can give to you. You'll get all sorts of interpretations to your question.
Amongst all the virtues that one can choose to locate or characterize the book, number 43, I want to for the people of South Africa. My question is very simple. Shouldn't the second book or the movie be about justice for the people of Swaziland? That's my question. Thanks.
No, thanks, Ika. First of all, to congratulate the effort that Elias and the family, the Masilela family have done. I think it's one in a million that are necessary to capture the essence of people's experiences. That is for you. But I just wanted to ask one question, or two questions to you, Elias. The first one is, what would you think this particular experience relates as regards the history of Swaziland? Particularly, or what is its relevance? Let me put it that way. Its relevance to the actual history of the people of Swaziland today. Particularly, I'm saying this because one of the tragedies that history experiences is that once an interaction has happened, all sorts of interpretations come into place about history and society and how it evolved. So it would be useful to say what lessons come out of this, not necessarily for South Africa now, or where the actual site of events was, that is Swaziland. That is the first question. The second one is, in the context of your narration, or let me say, your summation of the experiences, what do you think South Africans, particularly the South Africans who moved from South Africa to stay in Swaziland, who then at some point, at the point of liberation, came back to South Africa, what do you think their contribution could be in sharing experiences with ordinary Swazis? Because certainly they are indebted to the community that accommodated them, that was able to take care of them all the years. In the context of the current situation, what do you think their role could be? Because, for instance, I'm a Swazi, I'm in South Africa, I live with South Africa. We relate these experiences and discuss them. So the point of the matter that it would be useful or interesting to get your point of view. What do you think the South Africans who have lived in South Africa all these years, who have come to South Africa, who have lived in Swaziland, who have come back to South Africa, what do you think their contribution could be to the taking forward of the society of South Africa?
The second question is similar to that one, which is very complex to deal with here. However, we could have an engagement outside of this gathering to deal with what South Africans could actually do. However, I think what I would want to dispel immediately is that they generated a liability for themselves by going to Swaziland. I hope that's not what you're saying. But with regard to the first question, what do we learn from the history of Swaziland? I think we learned a lot of things. The two that I would like to highlight is that South Africa imposed a lot of risk, a lot of pressure on Swaziland. Swaziland was amongst the closest countries to South Africa during those days. And it was very easy for Swaziland to be pulverized by the ruling party of that time. And we can't ignore that. The second thing that I think we learned from this is that Swaziland was actually an essential part of South Africa's liberation. We can debate this. But it was an essential part in the sense that the bulk of operations of the ANC originated from Mozambique. And their origination from Mozambique, they passed through Swaziland. Whenever they retreated into Swaziland. When the 1976 flood of people from South Africa left, a significant portion of those people ended up in Swaziland. And they just stayed there, they lived there. That imposed a lot of strain on the economic and social infrastructure of that country. But at no point do I remember the Swaziland government complaining about that. In the TRC submission of the ANC says that the bulk of their operations actually went through that route. And if the ANC itself can say that, you can understand the appreciation they have for Swaziland. 2 years in a row, they have recognized two prominent Swazis, King Sobhuza II and Dr. Ambrose Zwane. That is a recognition of the contribution of Swaziland to the liberation of South Africa. I think that's the only way I can try to answer your question. Thank you very much.